So I had brought this book this morning because I was going to read one of the stories. There's some stories of the Buddha encountering people who were grieving, and yeah, it's just nice to see how he helped them. So yesterday you told the story of Kisa Gotami. Oh, very generally, but I mean yeah, yeah. And there's another story if I can find it. Where did it go? Her name was Patachara, 33, 34. So yeah, it's a little bit long, but I won't read the whole thing. But so this woman was married and had 2 children, and she was so she and her husband and 2 children were trying to make a journey to her parents' home, and there was this incredible storm that happened, probably like the one we had the other day. Thunder and lightning and heavy rain coming. And so to make a long story short, just within a couple of days, both of her children died and her husband in this journey that they were trying to make. And then she continued alone. She was the only survivor and continued going towards her family's home. And when she got there, she discovered that they had died as well. This storm was so heavy it destroyed their house. So the house was destroyed, the parents were dead, and I think there was another family member, a brother, who was dead. And so, yeah, it's like she lost everyone, her whole family and home, within a couple of days. And then she lost her mind. So we can easy to understand. She went mad and started just wandering around in circles. Her clothing became ragged and fell off. And she just became like a crazy woman. And I think she was in that state for quite a while. And then one day, while she was still mad and walking in circles, she entered Jeta Grove, where the Buddha was preaching. So that was one of the places. What was that, in Rajgir? I can't remember. Anyway, one of the places where the Buddha would often teach. And the people who were around saw her, and they tried to, push her away, like, don't come, don't bother the Buddha. But the Buddha, approached her and stood in front of her. And as she encountered him, he said, "Sister, recover your presence of mind." And she recovered her presence of mind. So the power of the Buddha, being in the presence of an enlightened being, her mind cleared up. And then she looked down and realized she was naked, because she'd been wandering around naked, just totally out of it. And she felt very, uncomfortable, but someone gave her a piece of cloth to wrap around her. Then she asked the Buddha for help and told him her story. And then he replied, "Patachara, don't think you have come to someone who can help you. In your many lives, you have shed more tears for the dead than there is water in the 4 oceans." So that made her grief less heavy. And he went on to say that when she herself went to another world, no kin could help. that even in this world, no kin can help. So this is, you know, one of the teachings we often encounter, that, the kind of help we can get from friends and family is very transitory. They can't really give us long-term help because we can't be with them forever. And so, yeah, we're often completely on our own. And then he taught her the Buddhist path. When he had finished, he asked if she could be ordained. Together, they went to the community of nuns, and she was accepted there. So she became a nun and practiced and attained nirvana. So she actually, yeah, eventually. Doesn't say how long. Yeah, these kind of stories are very, very brief. There isn't a whole lot of information. Often there's only the poem, and you have to do research for the whole story. So this is another situation where the Buddha helped somebody who was suffering from grief. And it's interesting, her story is very similar to the one I told the other day about this woman, the Sri Lankan woman, who she also lost husband, 2 children, and parents, all in a very short period of time. But even though she's from Sri Lanka, it doesn't sound like she's a Buddhist. So maybe she didn't, have refuge in Buddhism. But it seems like she has recovered. I just kind of looked up to see where she's at now, and yeah, she's kind of recovered her life. Sometimes living in New York, sometimes in London, and she's an economist. That was her profession. So she's, employed by various universities like Columbia University. So I saw a picture of her looking very happy. And it was 20 years since that tsunami. I was wondering when it was. It was 2004, so 20 years ago. So I was wondering, like, when we hear stories like this of happy endings, people who went through an experience of loss and grief, but, after some time, managed to rebuild their lives and find happiness, or in this case, becoming an arhat, attaining nirvana. That's really a good ending. What do you think? Do you think that if you yourself are experiencing grief, is it helpful to hear stories like that? Like, just to know that there's an end to what you're going through. Like right now, maybe it's hard to imagine you could ever be happy again, because yeah, the suffering is so strong. But if you hear about other people who found a way out and found happiness again, do you think it's helpful? Yeah, just to know that there is hope, there is an end to it all. Does anyone think it might make you feel worse?
If I'm in the mindset that my grief is special, that I am suffering more than others have suffered, then I don't think hearing the happy endings would help. I think it would make me more cling to, but my grief is special, it will never end. But otherwise, if I'm in that mindset of, okay, yes, other people go through this, like this is, something I have in common with others, then I think it would be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I was going to talk about this as another kind of method we can use when we're facing a difficulty, is, to think of others who have gone through and maybe are going through the same kind of difficulty as ourselves, so we don't feel we're alone. And if we do that, in a skillful way, it can increase our compassion, and it can also reduce our suffering. So I'll talk about that later. There's also this Buddhist practice called rejoicing, or sympathetic joy, it's also known as. And that's feeling happy for the happiness of others. right? Sharing in the happiness of others. So it's actually a practice that we can cultivate. I mean, it's something that just happens naturally sometimes, especially with people you love, people you care about, your siblings, your children, if you're a parent, other family members, people you really love and really care about. You know, that means you want them to be happy. And when you see them happy, you're happy too, right? That's something that we just sometimes feel. And even if it's strangers, like if you see some children playing and they look so happy, they're having such a good time, so much fun, yeah, that can bring up happiness in yourself. So that's the meaning of yeah, it can be called rejoicing or sympathetic joy. Take kind of sharing the joy of others. So it's something that does occur naturally. However, it doesn't always happen because sometimes it's like the opposite of jealousy or envy. Okay. Sympathetic joy and envy are like opposite states of mind, because envy is when we are unhappy about somebody else's happiness or good fortune, or, you know. So we probably have that experience too. You see somebody doing well, having a good time, having some good fortune happening to them, and instead of feeling happy, you feel, ooh, yeah, jealous, envious. So that's really painful, right? Doesn't feel good to feel that way. It's just makes your mind unhappy. And I mean, it's one of the afflictions. Jealousy is one of the, it's not one of the root afflictions, it's a secondary affliction, but it's an affliction, meaning it, something that disturbs our mind and leads to suffering. It's a cause of suffering. And so it's something we look out for and want to counteract, want to overcome. And it's said that rejoicing is the antidote. Yeah, it's the opposite state of mind. So instead of feeling unhappy that this person is doing well, has this, is doing that, da 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 da, they're having these good things that you don't have, but you want to have. So instead of being unhappy about that, you rejoice. You think, how wonderful. I'm so happy for them. And I mean, it's very difficult to totally switch our mind like that, you know, to just go from jealousy to rejoicing, unless we have a lot of practice. If we've done it a lot, then we can do it easily. But it initially, you know, it's not really how we feel. However, you can still try it out. You know, you can just like grit your teeth and say, I'm really happy for how wonderful. Isn't it nice? Something like that. I mean, just say the words to yourself, even if it's not how you really feel in your heart, but just to say those words to yourself, try to feel that way. And you might notice that actually that feels better. You know, if I can try to do that with my mind, feel that way with my mind, it feels better than being jealous. And so if you try it out, you'll probably feel, yeah, this is a better way to, you know, respond to this situation rather than jealousy. So then, you know, you keep trying to do that, and eventually it does become natural. It becomes easy to feel that way. And so, yeah, I was thinking about that with this question that I just asked. That if you're miserable and you see somebody else who's happy, um, try it out. Even if it's not what's coming up naturally and spontaneously in your mind, but just think, oh, look, that person, yeah, they lost their husband 10 years ago. And now look, they've found somebody else. They've found another life, and they're happy, they're smiling. How wonderful. I'm happy for them. So try it out. So even if you're miserable, and it may not immediately make you happier, but at least probably on the intellectual level, you can understand, yeah, this is a better way to feel. And I want to try to feel that way more. So if we make an effort, yeah, like that expression, fake it till you make it. You know, making an effort to feel that way, to think that way, it will make it easier for that to happen gradually. So anyway, I wanted to talk about a few other these Lojong thought training methods. I will leave some time later before we end for questions. So, so I mentioned this morning that according to this book, so the book Transforming Problems into Happiness is like commentary by Lama Zopa Rinpoche to this Tibetan text, which we don't, the name of the author is a little bit long and complicated, but maybe that's okay. And anyway, the author of that text talks about how we have to, work on overcoming aversion to our problems. We try to stop having that attitude of aversion that says, I don't like this, I don't want this. And that's not easy to do. It's, it's just our natural response to an unpleasant experience is to feel aversion to it. And so I think one thing that can help is to just recognize that state of mind of aversion, dislike, whatever you want to call it, but that state of mind that says, I don't like this, I don't want this. You're trying to push it away, reject it. That state of mind isn't helpful, and in fact, it's disturbing. Yeah, it's a disturbing state of mind. And so, but it's good to do this on your own. Like when you do have that feeling of aversion coming up, try to take a step back from it and look at it and observe it and ask yourself, is this a good state of mind? Is this a state of mind I want to perpetuate? I want to keep having again and again and again. Because we can work with our mind. Just because aversion comes up doesn't mean we have to accept it and go with it and dwell in it. We can do something other than getting stuck in it. So just try to, look objectively at aversion itself and ask yourself, do I want this? Is this helpful for me? And I thought to share something I heard from Ajahn Brahm. He was talking about the 5 hindrances to concentration. And one of those is it's usually called ill will, or, I don't know, different terms for it, but ill will or malice. And it's normally explained as the wish to harm, like having thoughts of hurting somebody. That's pretty strong. But he defined it differently. He said, ill will is the fault-finding mind. It's that mind that finds faults. I don't like this, I don't like that. And I found that really helpful because I have it a lot. I don't have, harmful thoughts very often, like actually wanting to hurt somebody, but I have a lot of fault-finding mind almost constantly. No, that's an exaggeration, but just looking at people, looking at things happening around. I don't like that, and I don't like that, and that's yeah. And also with yourself, I don't like this, I don't like that. So, so what he said really helped me become more aware of that in myself. Not that I wasn't aware of it before, but I heard this while I was in a retreat, so I was able to look much more carefully at my mind. And so that is not only is it a disturbing state of mind, it's unpleasant to have that going on in your mind, but it's also an obstacle to concentration. Because if that comes up when you're meditating, your mind gets disturbed. Yeah, you may get kind of obsessed about this thing you don't like, or this person you don't like, or what you don't like about them, and then your mind gets all caught up in thinking about that, and maybe what you can do about that. Maybe you should tell them, you know. But you know what I mean. That kind of thought process can go on, and so you've lost your concentration. And he also made another comment that I found really helpful. He said that in his experience, because he leads a lot of group meditation retreats, and he says he's noticed that people who have more kindness, more loving kindness, do better in their practice. They're able to get concentration better. So I thought that's kind of in the same vein, you know, because if you do have a lot of ill will or fault finding, critical, you know, aversion, that type of mind, then yeah, it's going to be hard to concentrate. But if you have less of that kind of mental activity, you're able to be more kind, more patient, more loving, and so on, then your mind will be more peaceful and therefore easier to concentrate. So that's something else to examine. You know, what effect does aversion have on your practice of meditation and just your general well-being and peace of mind? So those are just suggestions to be able to recognize the faults, the disadvantages of aversion. So if you can recognize that, then yeah, that will help you recognize that aversion to problems, to difficulties, to unpleasant experiences, whether it's outside yourself or inside yourself, that way of reacting, that way of responding is not helpful, and try to decrease that. And then on the other hand, the book recommends that we look at the good qualities of problems, the benefits of problems, beneficial aspects of experiencing problems. So there's a verse in Shantideva's text about the benefits of problems. He says, the good qualities, well, he uses the word suffering or dukkha. The good qualities of dukkha are that it dispels arrogance through disenchantment, compassion arises for those in cyclic existence, non-virtue is shunned, and joy is found in virtue. So we'll go through those one by one. So first he says it dispels arrogance through disenchantment. So arrogance, also known as pride, is another affliction. It's actually one of the root afflictions. And there's different kinds of arrogance, but it usually involves feeling superior to others. We tend to compare ourselves with others and feel that we are better than them. And it can arise for different reasons, like if you're wealthier than somebody else, or if you're more intelligent than somebody else, if you're, at a higher level of education, you have higher degrees than somebody else, if you're more attractive than somebody else. So almost anything could be a basis where we compare ourselves with somebody else and find ourselves superior and them inferior. And this can also come up within spiritual groups. Yeah, I know more, I've been around more, I've been ordained longer, I've done more retreats, and so on. Yeah, I'm more patient. so even those of us on this spiritual path can fall prey to this state of mind. So we have to look out for it. It's an obstacle. It's an affliction. It's one of the things that keeps us in samsara, in a state of suffering, prevents the attainment of higher states of mind. So it's something we need to reduce and eventually overcome. So I think what Shantideva is talking about is when things are going well for us, yeah, everything's going well, we're not facing any problems, everything's smooth and easy, life is rosy, it's easy to feel arrogant. Yeah, it's easy to feel, oh, I'm fantastic, everything's fantastic, that kind of puffed up feeling. And then when problems happen, it's a little bit like we get deflated. Yeah. Yeah, things aren't perfect. Things aren't absolutely wonderful in our life. So it gives us an opportunity if we're willing to be introspective and look at ourselves and acknowledge that we're not perfect. Then this is an opportunity to see imperfections in ourselves. For example, the way we respond to a problem. Maybe we get angry. Maybe we get depressed. Maybe we dwell in self-pity. Okay, so we might recognize, if we're honest with ourselves, we can recognize that our way of dealing with problems isn't so great, is far from perfect. And so that's like a sign that, yeah, we have work to do. If we do want to work on ourselves, improve ourselves, then this gives us an opportunity to see areas where we need to, areas of improvement. Does that make sense? So that can help to, yeah, reduce pride. Yeah. And then he says it dispels arrogance through disenchantment. And I think maybe this term disenchantment could um, refer to renunciation, like just recognizing that not only are we not perfect, but also this situation that we are in as unenlightened beings, being in samsara, that this situation is far from perfect because we still have to experience problems and sufferings and difficulties. And so it gives us a chance to have another look at samsara, cyclic existence, and its dukkha, the suffering. So that can help us with renunciation. Because, yeah, if things are really going well, we're not facing any problems, it's kind of hard to have renunciation at those times. And, samsara is not so bad. Yeah. But when a problem comes, it's like, oh, yes, I'm still in samsara, and there are problems, and there will be more problems in the future. And so it gives us a chance to, um, um, work on that, increase our renunciation or disenchantment with samsara. Then he mentions compassion. He says, so it can help us have compassion for those in cyclic existence. So in Buddhism, compassion is explained as the wish for others to not suffer. So it's when we notice somebody who is suffering and we feel moved, touched, and want to help them. That's the meaning of compassion. So it's something we do feel naturally, but it's probably limited. We probably don't feel it all the time and for everyone, but there are ways we can increase our compassion so we can feel it more and more. And then they talk about immeasurable compassion, like in the prayer, the four immeasurables we do at the beginning. So it's wishing all sentient beings to be free of their suffering and causes of suffering. So that's compassion for all beings, not omitting anyone, not excluding anyone. So compassion is a really important quality to develop on the path, especially the Bodhisattva's path. It's essential. There's no way we can develop bodhicitta and aspire for enlightenment without feeling compassion for all living beings. So it's something we do have to develop. But it's also, I think, the basis of ethical conduct, basis of ethics in Buddhism, which is not harming others. living our life in such a way that we refrain from doing harmful actions to others. So that means understanding that others don't want to suffer, just like us. We don't want to suffer. We don't want to be harmed by anybody with physical actions or verbal actions or even mental actions. We don't like it when somebody hates us. So that's painful. It hurts. And so we can see that in ourselves, and then we extend that to others and understand that, yeah, they don't want to suffer either. And out of consideration for that, out of the wish to not make them suffer, then we are very careful with the things that we do, physical actions, also the things we say, our words, and even with our thoughts. Um, so, yeah, to me, it's not always clearly explained like that, but I think compassion is really the basis for ethics in Buddhism, non-harmfulness. And so, yeah, for our own happiness, to be able to create virtue and attain higher states of mind, eventually enlightenment, we need to develop compassion, but it's also good for others because it means we will not harm them. So, there are meditations for cultivating compassion, but we can also use our problems, experiences of suffering, difficulties, to develop compassion. And so this is one really effective way of transforming problems into the path. So when we're experiencing some problem, like grief, the loss of a loved one, or loss, some other kind of loss, or any other kind of problem, including, disturbing thoughts and emotions coming up in our mind, like I was talking about this morning, then we can, think, I'm not the only person in the world who has a problem like this. Many other people, even at the same moment that I'm having this problem, there are probably other people who are having the same kind of problem. Maybe not exactly the same, but similar. And so that helps us open up our heart to others. And it's actually really effective to do this, because one thing that often happens, you might notice this, when we're experiencing a problem, we can get kind of self-absorbed. My problem, my suffering. And it may almost seem like I'm the only person in the world who's suffering. You ever noticed that? Or like Venerable Rinchen said, my suffering is worse than everybody else's. Yeah, they may have suffering too, but mine is worse. I don't think we do that deliberately, but it's just, just kind of a habit that we have. And if we take a step back and ask ourselves, is that true? Am I really the only person in the world who's suffering? Or is my suffering really worse than everybody else's? So if we do a reality check on that, then it should be obvious that that's not true. There's lots of other people who are suffering too, and some of them are suffering much worse than us. So thinking about that, contemplating that, it helps you see your suffering, your problem in perspective. And what happens is when we're kind of obsessed with, focused on my suffering, my problem, it can seem bigger than it is. Like that expression, making a mountain out of a molehill. Yeah, it might not really be that bad, but because of our way of looking at it, it can seem really, really huge. And then it's as though we feel like we're buried under this mountain. I can't handle it. I can't breathe. It's unbearable. So just by our mental activity, the way we're looking at the problem, it can seem worse, and it feels worse. Whereas thinking about the problems of others and realizing some people's problems are worse than mine, much worse than mine, that can reduce our problem. then it seems more like a molehill rather than a mountain. Or maybe it will still look like a big hill, but not as big as Mount Everest like before. And the Dalai Lama tells a story about this to illustrate this. There was a time when he was in India, and he was supposed to be giving teachings. I was actually there. Thousands of people had gathered in Bodh to get teachings from him. And he had this pain in his abdomen, really, really, really severe pain. And so they had to, you know, cancel the teachings, and they took him. There's no hospital in Bodh, so they had to drive him to the nearest city, which was a couple of hours away. And he said he was sitting in the car, really, really having a lot of pain. But then looking out the window, this is one of the poorest areas in India, Bihar state, and there's just so much poverty. And he was looking out the window and seeing like little children who had almost no clothing and very skinny, and they were just kind of playing in the dirt, and elderly people just kind of lying on the ground like nobody caring for them. So just looking at these people and their suffering. And he said he just felt so much compassion for them. And he kind of, his own pain seemed to diminish. Yeah. Either because he wasn't focused on it, or I don't know. Anyway, so doing that, focusing on others and their suffering, and feeling compassion for them, really helped him to manage the pain that he was feeling. So it wasn't so unbearable. So and when I do this method as well, I find it very, very helpful, very effective. Um, your own problem might still be there, but you're looking at it in a different way. It seems smaller, more manageable. You feel like, oh, okay, yeah, compared to what other people are going through, this problem isn't really that bad, that huge, and I think I can manage it. So, yeah. So it gives you the chance to generate compassion for others, but it also helps you see your own problem in a way that you don't feel so overwhelmed by it. Does that make sense? But we also have to be careful with this, because if we don't do it skillfully, thinking about the suffering of others and all the suffering in the world might exacerbate our own suffering. Yeah? Have you ever noticed that? Because you're suffering, you have these problems, then you think about all the other people and their problems, and then you may just feel, oh God, there's just so much suffering in the world, and it's never going to end, and there's nothing that can be done. Yeah. So you have to be careful. That's not where you want to go. That's not the direction you want to go in. So I'm not quite sure how to avoid that, how you to avoid that. I guess, one thought is just make sure that you maintain understanding that suffering isn't permanent, and that there is a way out for everybody, as explained in Buddhism, that every being has the potential to be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. Everyone has the potential to attain liberation and enlightenment. So if you have that understanding in your mind firmly, that could help you not become depressed and have despair, thinking about the suffering of others. Any other ideas about how to avoid that, going in that direction, which wouldn't be helpful?
By looking at it from a karmic standpoint and recognizing this is like really intense negative karma that's ripening, and if I don't compound it, then I'm going to be done with it.
Yeah, karma is another method. That's the next one we'll look at. Yeah, so thinking in terms of karma, that whatever suffering and problems there are the result of karma, which in turn comes from ignorance. So just thinking about the causes and conditions that give rise to suffering, and making the determination to work on reducing those causes and conditions and create the opposite causes and conditions, of virtue, good karma and so on. So thinking in terms of, dependent arising, cause and effect.
One thing I've found, because I've also gotten stuck in what you were saying, is that's better is focus on looking at the kinds of suffering that you might be able to do something about, and then you focus on those, learn about them, and do something to help if possible.
Yeah, that's good. Because I think sometimes maybe we feel I should be able to eliminate all the suffering in the world, right? We expect too much of ourselves. I mean, it's good to have the wish to do that and to aspire to do that in the future, but we got to be realistic. We have to accept that where we're at right now, we can't do that. Even the Buddha can't eliminate all the suffering in the world. So we focus on what we can do, like work on ourselves and reduce the suffering and causes of suffering in ourselves, and then try to help others around us as much as we can. Yeah, so be realistic, be practical, do what you can do, and then accept what you can't do. Yeah. So yeah, that's good as well. So anyway, I guess I'm just trying to point out that be careful when you do think about the suffering of others. Do that skillfully so you don't end up feeling depressed and in despair. And if that does happen, then pull yourself back and try something else. But yeah, if we do this well, then it can open our hearts, increase our compassion, and help us manage our problem better. So that's like a way of transforming a situation where we have some kind of problem, some kind of difficulty, something unwanted, utilizing it so that it increases our compassion, enhances our compassion. And then we can also do tonglen. I'll talk about that a little later, but that's a practice we can do on the basis of compassion. Okay, so then karma. So Shantideva's verse, the last part of it says, non-virtue is shunned and joy is found in virtue. So those relate to karma. So this may not work for everybody because not everybody has conviction in karma. But if you do, if karma makes sense to you, then you can bring that in. Think about karma. So the way of doing that is, the problem, the difficulty you're experiencing right now is happening because of some non-virtuous action, some negative action that you did in the past, not necessarily this life, but it could be a previous life, because they say most karma, it's not sure, but some of our karma can ripen in the same lifetime, but some of it will ripen in later lives. So anyway, at some point in the past, we did something hurtful, harmful, negative, and that left this karmic imprint in our mind, and that is now ripening in the form of this problem, this misfortune that is happening to us. And so people who believe in karma, who are like convinced in karma, that is really helpful, because then they can think, okay, so there's a reason why this is happening. It's not like meaningless. It's not coming from somebody else like God or other people. It's the result of my own actions done out of ignorance and motivated by afflictions. And then what you need to do is to think, okay, so now I can see the results of non-virtuous actions. And if I don't want this kind of experience again in the future, I have to make sure that I stop doing those non-virtuous actions. And so it's kind of like a lesson in karma. If you're not careful about karma and you create bad karma, this is what's going to happen to you. And if you don't like it, you better stop creating that bad karma. Also, what I've heard, you know, Tibetans, for example, say is when misfortune occurs, you can even feel happy about it because it's like you're getting rid of that bad karma. Okay, that bad karma was there in your mind, and now it's ripened, and so it's finished. It's a bit like paying off a debt. Like karma is a little bit like a debt. So that much of your debt has now been paid off. So now your karmic debt has been reduced. So there is that way of thinking that you could try out. um, and that can help you not feel so miserable about what you're going through. And then with virtue, so then, you know, the other side of karma is good karma, virtuous karma. And so that is the cause of good experiences, happy experiences, which is what we want. Okay, that's what we want, are good experiences, not bad ones. So you think, okay, if I want to be happy and have good experiences rather than problems like this, I need to create the causes for that. And that's virtue, good karma. So that's roughly the way of thinking with a problem that can help you make a stronger determination to be careful about your karma, refrain from negative karma as much as you can, create virtue as much as you can, and purify. Do purification, whatever negative karma that you may have created in the past. So I found that method really helpful at one point. I was having a problem with somebody who was angry at me and trying to hurt me, be mean to me, and it was quite hurtful. So I was trying all these different methods for, you know, not reacting with anger and practicing patience. And I found this one particularly helpful because I could easily accept that I created karma to have this experience. I thought about the way I behaved as a child with my siblings. I was sometimes really mean and nasty to my younger siblings and sometimes with my friends as well. So I could remember, you know, times when I was nasty to somebody else. I didn't have to think about past lives, but this very lifetime. And then I thought, okay, so now I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of that kind of behavior. Now I understand how they felt when I was being nasty to them. And I thought, this is really bad. I don't like this feeling, and I don't want to make other people feel this way. So I had this really, really strong feeling from my heart that I never want to make anyone suffer like this. I never want to be mean to anybody, ever, ever, ever. Yeah, so I made that kind of resolve, determination to never mistreat anyone, never make anyone suffer again. I hope I could keep that going life after life, but so that was really helpful to think in terms of karma and make a strong resolution to, to stop creating the cause that led me to be in that situation. And create virtue instead. Be nice to people, be kind, make them happy rather than miserable. So, but then, so this is, you know, in terms of ourself, with our own experiences, problems and so on happening to us, thinking in terms of karma. But I think we have to be careful when it comes to somebody else, someone else who's going through some bad experience. We have to be very careful about talking about karma. Because actually that woman I mentioned, the one, the Sri Lankan woman who lost her whole family and everything, there was an interview with her, and she said, you know, lots of people were trying to help her after all this loss that she had. And somebody mentioned karma. Because, I mean, I don't know, she didn't sort of elaborate on that, but that was definitely not helpful for her. Because then it's almost like, so are you suggesting that it was my bad karma that my children and husband and parents were killed? I mean, I think you probably already blame yourself when something like that happens. As a mother, you naturally feel responsible for your children, and I have to protect them. So it's possible, I don't know for sure, but she may have already been thinking that she should have been able to save her kids, and she didn't, that, so there may have been self-blame for that. And then, to have that suggestion of karma, I would think would just increase that sense of self-blame. My fault, my responsibility. I am to blame for this tragedy. So yeah, be very, very careful. Probably better to just not even mention karma unless you know that person is a very, very strong practitioner and they believe totally 100% in karma, and they can, they won't fall into that mistake. But yeah, because otherwise it can sound like it's your fault. You're bad. You're a bad person. We're, probably already feeling that way. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? Yeah, so just be very careful, sensitive to how someone might respond to that. I'll just mention one more and then we can stop and see if there's questions. So refuge. So refuge is what we do in Buddhism. We take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha with the understanding of their qualities, their abilities to help us. And yeah, so after learning about those, thinking about those, and feeling, yes, I do want to follow the Buddha, his teachings, his guidance. And so then we make this commitment to follow the Buddha's teachings. So that's the meaning of refuge. And so that can be very helpful, very comforting when we're facing problems and difficulties, to just think of objects of refuge, the Buddha, Tara, Chenrezig. Different people connect with different Buddha figures. So whoever you feel most connected with, you can bring that being, that enlightened being or beings to mind and feel their presence, feel that they are there, they're aware of what you're going through, how you feel, and they have love and compassion and wisdom and are there to help you. I mean, that doesn't mean you should expect that they're going to appear in front of you and talk to you, but that can happen. It does happen sometimes. There's stories about people having, visions of Buddhas and so on, giving them help, but that doesn't always happen. But just to have them in your mind, in your heart, and you can talk to them, and that can be very comforting. It helps you not feel so alone and abandoned, which especially in times of loss and feeling grief, easy to feel that way. So there's this nice saying from Lama Zopa Rinpoche. He said, "You're never alone. There are always many," I can't remember the exact words, "many or countless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas around you all the time, aware of you, looking at you, ready to help you," something like that. I don't remember the exact words, but I just love that, that thought. I think, yeah, I'm not alone. There are these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who are ready to help me, want to help me. And I just have to turn my attention to them, open my heart to them, and receive their help, their guidance. And so yeah, turning to the objects of refuge at times of pain, suffering, confusion, and so on can strengthen your refuge. That's what they're there for. That's what refuge is for, is to help us through difficulties and help us get beyond, get out of suffering and difficulties. Okay, so I do have a few other things, but I'll leave them for tomorrow. Did want to give you a chance to ask questions. So anything I talked about this morning or this afternoon, Tuche?
Yeah, I'm getting pretty confused about like how, from one's own perspective, um, regarding your grief and the death of another person, how do you think of it's your karma ripening?
Um, I'm not sure exactly, but I think if, yeah, the death of a person is mainly due to their karma, because they say that when we are born in this life as a result of karma created in the past, and the karma to be in this life also includes our lifespan. So we have there's a certain amount of time that we have to be in this life. That's also determined by our karma. And there's also cases of what they call untimely death. You know, we might have the karma to live longer, but some other karma comes along, like, and we get into a car crash, or there's a famine and there isn't enough food. So something else could interfere with our karma to live longer. But otherwise, I think maybe most cases, people just live as long as they have karma for. I think someone dying is the result of their karma and not your karma, even if it's your husband or your mother or your father, your child. So it's their karma. But on the other hand, the fact that we are losing that person, yeah, and could be in a tragic way or could be in an untimely way. So that would be related to our karma. I'm just guessing. I haven't really come across an explanation of this, but I'm just guessing according to what I do understand of karma, that that's how it would work. Like we have the karma to lose a loved one. But that doesn't mean it's our karma that caused them to die. Does that make sense? Has anyone else heard any explanation about this?
Not for this specific situation, but I find it helpful to think about karma in terms of the experience. So the suffering that I'm experiencing due to this person's death, like that suffering, those unpleasant feelings, that I think of as the ripening of karma. So that way I don't have to have my karma somehow magically killing the person. But my painful experience of it is my karma ripening.
Yeah, they do say that, yeah, karma ripens as feelings. So good karma ripens as pleasant feelings, bad karma ripens as unpleasant feelings. But I don't think that means that's all there is to karma. Karma ripens in other ways as well, such as an untimely death. So I think there are various ways that karma can ripen. But that, yeah, that would be one way of looking at it. The suffering that I'm experiencing as a result of losing this person who was very important to me, that is the result of my karma. But yeah, don't think it's your karma that caused that death. That wouldn't be. I don't think that's correct. Yeah.
Well, I guess I still get stuck. I mean, all that I understand. Thank you for clarifying. So we talked about how grief is, like, especially from the Western perspective, is like a natural, like it's like that's what we feel when somebody dies. So then how do you contextualize that? Because on the one hand, we're like, it's our karma to experience, the cause of something we've caused in previous life, and it's also natural. So I guess I'm getting all like confused about all that. Like, how do we see grief? Do you
Well,
know what I'm saying?
I mean, I think Buddhism would agree with that too. It's a natural in the sense that this is one of the experiences in samsara. As long as we are still in samsara, not free of samsara, we haven't gone beyond samsara, we're still in samsara, then um, we lose. We have losses. We lose loved ones. We separate from loved ones. We lose jobs and possessions and body parts and all kinds of things. That's just one of the experiences that happens again and again as long as we're in samsara. Now, how much grief we experience over that would be an individual thing. I mean, some people may feel more grief at a loss, others less grief. So it's not that everyone experiences grief in exactly the same way. But yeah, that's how I see it. Like in that list of when the Buddha gave his first teaching and he mentioned all those different experiences that we have in samsara, sorrow, grief, lamentation, not getting what we want, and so on and so on. These are, in a way, natural, you can say, for samsara, normal, typical experiences that beings in samsara have again and again and again. And if you're sick of it, find a way out. Yeah, does that make sense? So I don't think it's
Yes,
contradictory.
thank you. That clarifies. Thank you very much.
Yeah. It's just that, like, the Western model, science, philosophy, and so on, aren't thinking in terms of samsara, and also, I mean, they have very good knowledge of human suffering, especially mental suffering, physical suffering, and methods for helping people who are suffering. And some of these methods can be very effective, but they don't have the model or the explanation of the root causes of suffering, like we have in Buddhism, like ignorance and afflictions and karma. So they lack that knowledge of how suffering comes about. So to me, it seems like they're treating more the surface, the superficial level of suffering and problems, and they do pretty good with that. But there's no knowledge about how to uproot it, how to, eliminate the root causes of suffering so that you can stop it altogether. And no knowledge of someone who's done that, right? Like, try to talk to a doctor or a scientist about a Buddha, an enlightened being, or an arhat, and they're like, huh? I mean, that type of person just isn't known. And I suppose, well, now there are some, experiments have been done on meditators, people who've done a lot of meditation, like Richard Davidson. That's one of the things they were doing in his lab, getting meditators into the lab and hooking them up, checking their brain waves, putting them inside of MRI machines, checking what's going on in their brains. And they're finding pretty amazing results, that what's going on in the brains of those people is very different than what goes on in the brains of other people. So there is some interest in it, at least on the level of the brain, and to investigate people who have spent a lot of time meditating, and they do find that there are they're pretty amazing things happening there. But that knowledge is still probably very limited. It hasn't gotten out very far. But yeah, I think, because of the Dalai Lama and the, what do they call it, the Mind and Life conferences that have been going on several decades now, I think a lot of scientists have become interested in that whole area. And there's even something called contemplative science. People are studying that and getting degrees in that and doing research in that. And I mean, that's pretty new. 20, 30 years ago, I don't think anybody was doing that. So, so maybe, Western science will start incorporating some of these ideas and practices. Did you have?
I was just going to say, wouldn't environmental karma possibly explain people having losing a lot of people in their lives if they have the environmental karma to be born in a war zone or in a place with high child mortality? Then they're, more likely to suffer the loss of children.
Are you talking about the environmental result of karma? Because there's these different results of karma.
No,
One is
Venerable Rabina talks about like four different kinds of karma. One of which is the karma to be born in a particular environment.
no. That's not four different kinds of karma. It's four different kinds of karmic results.
Okay.
So one karma, one action that we do, if it's done in a complete way, can have these four different types of results. One result is a rebirth that we take. That's called the maturation result, fruitional result. So, if the karma is complete, then it becomes the cause for a whole rebirth, a whole life. And then there's two results that are similar to the cause. One in terms of experience. You have an experience similar to what you did. If you killed somebody, then you can be killed. And then there's also similar in terms of tendency. You have the tendency to do that action again. So as a result of killing, you have this kind of instinctive tendency to want to kill again and again and again. And then the fourth result is environmental result. So that's finding yourself in a particular environment, like as a result of killing. You may be in a war zone or in a place that's really unhealthy. Just really unpleasant situation. So it's environmental result of karma, not environmental karma. That's how it's explained. So what were you saying about that?
She was asking about, how it's your karma to have so many losses,
That, yeah, because what comes to mind, I don't remember all the details of that, but remember with sexual misconduct, if you engage in sexual misconduct, like, sexual behavior that's harmful, adultery and so on, the environmental result, or one of the results, could be the environmental result, is that you have trouble keeping partners, having stable, lasting relationships, because maybe your behavior was to, break up relationships. So you have an experience that's similar. Maybe that's more results similar to the cause. I think the environmental result is, being born in a kind of really dirty place. So each of the 10 non-virtues that we do is the cause for being born in a certain environment. But the way they talk about the environment, it's more like, environmental conditions, like around us, not so much. Could be people as well, like if you're born in a war zone, as a result of killing, I think you could be born in a place where there's a lot of fighting and aggression, so people are being very aggressive with each other.
Or if in a previous life, if you just were really cold about people dying, and didn't have any sympathy or empathy for people that suffered loss, then that could create the cause for in the next life to suffer a lot of loss.
Could be, yeah. Karma is very complex. I mean, the Buddha talked about these 10 non-virtues and the results of those, but then there's so many other kinds of actions. So that's just general guidelines. But there's many different kinds of good karma as well as bad karma that we could create.
2J's question reminded me of a question that came up earlier in the teachings. On another day, I was thinking of my experience as you were talking, and I realized, again, like I sometimes come to this wrong conclusion that because I'm suffering or something bad happened, that maybe if I'm like doing my spiritual practice, well, maybe I'm not doing it right, or I'm not doing enough, or I don't have enough faith. So I thought, like, how like if people have that question, for example, doing white Tara for the long life, health of a loved one or their teacher, and then it seems like it doesn't work. And so what would you tell them?
So you're saying if somebody has been doing a long life practice for a
Yeah, like
person,
they
and
feel
then
like they're doing some virtuous actions and doing dedications, and then it seems like it didn't work.
what you're asking for, hoping for, praying for doesn't come
Yeah.
about.
So that they don't have, like I do sometimes have this feeling of like, I guess I'm just not very, like maybe I'm
Doing
not sincere enough, or
doing it right.
didn't do it right, or
Yeah.
I'm bad or something like, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think there can be so many different factors and causes and conditions that can lead to, something happening. I mean, I guess what I'm thinking of is when Lama Yeshe passed away, 1984. That was the first time I experienced the loss of a teacher. And it wasn't completely unexpected because he had issues with his heart. His whole life he had, some kind of heart problem, and he actually lived longer than they thought he would. But still, we were frequently making prayers and pujas and so on for him to live long. And so, yeah, it was kind of a shock and surprising and sad that he passed away in spite of all our prayers. And yeah, I don't know. Like sometimes they say when a teacher passes away, it could be because the students haven't been practicing properly, or they haven't been sincere enough, or they haven't been harmonious enough. And I find that way of thinking, that kind of expression, not so helpful, because it's almost like it's your fault that your teacher passed away. You haven't been doing it right. You haven't been doing enough. And yeah, that for me, makes me feel really bad, because I feel like I am trying my best. I'm trying as hard as I can and trying to be as sincere as I can. So I'm not sure. Maybe that kind of statement could be helpful for some people, just to think, okay, I really have to practice better and, really use my life wisely and really make sure I'm, doing as much as I can to make sure my teacher is still there. So it could be helpful for some people to just give them a boost in their practice. But for other people, then it could be, blame, self-blame. So I'm just not sure what to think about that. But I don't think it's helpful to blame oneself. We tend to blame ourselves so much anyway, and feel bad so much anyway. So yeah. So like last year, yeah, it was last year, Lama Zopa Rinpoche passed away, which was quite surprising to everyone. I don't think we expected that to happen. And just recently, because I was in Spain, I was teaching in the FPMT centers, and somebody I was talking to mentioned that I guess some people have this explanation for why he passed away. And I thought was quite interesting. That I mean, it's only a theory. We don't know for sure. But he wanted to be able to come back so that he could still meet the Dalai Lama and get teachings from the Dalai Lama before the Dalai Lama passed away. Because the Dalai Lama might live for another, 20, 30 years. So to make sure I'm a child and I can, get the teachings and transmissions from the Dalai Lama. I thought, oh, that's a nice explanation. Like he did it deliberately. It's all planned. I mean, we don't know. But it's possible. It's possible because actually the Dalai Lama did say after Rinpoche passed away, I think he said something about how he's going to look for the little boy and, and look after him. And so, yeah, just to think about that the reincarnation of Lama Zopa Rinpoche will be this little boy, and he'll be able to be the disciple of the Dalai Lama again for a number of years. So I don't know. I mean, I'm in no position to say why lamas pass away when they do, but I just think there could be many reasons, many causes and conditions. But, blaming oneself, I didn't do enough, I didn't do it right, I didn't do it well, I don't think that's helpful. But it is good, to have the wish to practice sincerely to the best of our ability, but not to put ourselves down if we're maybe not practicing perfectly as we would like to. So you had a question? Huh?
Regarding this, I think I can share a case in Hong Kong. The Venerable Sis in Hong talk about a lay woman who is a very devoted practitioner. She practiced Buddhism very wholehearted on her life, but then she got cancer. So she lost faith in the book, in the Chiboncham. And she didn't come to the monastery anymore.
Oh.
And then he asked because that's a case study in one of our class. So he asked people the reason why. And after look at the condition, I told that there are many causes and conditions, not just because of her karma, because not everything is due to karma. Karma is not predestined. And then after analyzing, I say about her habit, because she had a bad habit of eating many kind of instant vegetarian food. That's very not healthy for her health.
Instant noodles. Yeah.
So that's one of the condition. But then that Venerable talked to her directly, and after a while she can recognize, and then she resumed her practice again.
That's good. No, that's good. Yeah. Yeah, this kind of illustrates a problem. People sometimes think that, oh, if I practice the Dharma, then everything should go well in my life. I shouldn't have any problems. Yeah? And then a problem comes along and we think, oh, this isn't working. I'll give this up and do something else. Yeah, so that's actually a misconception to think that, just because you're meditating and you're living ethically and you're vegetarian and I'm doing everything right, then everything should go well. I shouldn't have any problems. No, that's not correct, because we still have lots of karma from the past, and just starting to do some practice isn't going to wipe out all that karma. And so we do have to be careful about that, with ourselves, and also try to help other people not fall into that trap of, thinking everything should go well. And so, like what the lamas say is what they say is, when we're practicing Dharma, when we are really trying to practice sincerely and work on ourselves and so on, that itself can cause our karma to ripen. The karma that's buried in our mind, it can come up and ripen in ways that are lighter than otherwise, because we might have some really bad karma that could be the cause for like a whole rebirth in a really bad situation and a lot of suffering. So that karma, because we're practicing Dharma, that karma can ripen up can ripen in a form that's lighter, like having a headache or having a fever or, some relatively small, short-term bad experience. So that's again why the lamas, when they face problems, they say, "Oh, that's good, that karma is finishing," because we don't know what that karma might have caused if we weren't practicing Dharma. It could be a lot worse. So that's how they look at it. They don't get depressed. Like, for example, with the Tibet being occupied by the Chinese government and all the tragedies, all the terrible things that happen, at least some, and probably most of the lamas and practitioners, don't get angry about that and upset about that. They say, karma. And I guess in the past, ages ago, Tibetans were kind of wild. They were like the Mongols. They were riding their horses all over the Central Asian steppes and conquering people and killing people and doing a lot of negative things. They say, well, as a group, as a what do you call it? A social group, ethnic group, we created some bad karma. We took over other countries and killed people in other countries. So now that's happened to us. So they think in that way, and that helps them not be angry and bitter and, wanting to take revenge, but accept what has happened. They're still trying to get liberation, freedom, independence, but it just kind of gives you more peace of mind to have a reason, an explanation for what's happening. So anyway, yeah, it's good to try to understand that just because you're practicing Dharma doesn't mean you're gonna never have problems again. Problems will still happen, but at least you have tools like these methods we've been going through, tools you can use to work with these problems and even make these problems part of your spiritual path, part of your spiritual practice to grow your qualities of compassion, wisdom, and so on.
I think for me it's very inspiring when I read these stories of practitioners like Chodron Rinpoche, how much he suffered with
Chodron
Rinpoche, the Sarajay Chodron Rinpoche.
Yeah, who stayed in a basement 17 years.
And then, Milarepa, who, it was so much hardship with his teacher, and even Marpa, how many trips he had to go to India and just looking for his teacher, and how much hardship these practitioners have without getting discouraged.
Yeah, so that's actually another thing that's advised when we're going through difficulties and hardship, is to think of practitioners in the past. I mean, Buddha himself, sitting in the forest for 6 years, almost dying of starvation. And, every practitioner who achieved realizations, they went through hardship. And so it's just not realistic to think we can have it easy, never have any problems and still get enlightened. And that book I had yesterday, I think, No Mud, No Lotus, that's the point of that. Without the mud of samsara and problems and difficulties, then it's not possible to develop our mind, all the realizations, and reach enlightenment. And so to understand that problems, hardship, difficulties are not really bad in themselves. It's all a question of how we understand them, what perspective we have on them, and how we manage them when they occur. So there are these ways we can use to manage our problems and grow from our problems. So, and they say it's good to start with small problems. A mosquito is bothering you, or somebody's making noise you don't like. So start with, little problems that aren't too huge. And if you get experience in that way, then you can start working on bigger problems and eventually the really big ones.